Go, Steve, you're number one. Steve, number one. Go, Steve, go.
Up next, we have AJ Klein, who is a local activist. AJ is a student, nanny, active member of her community, and classic citizen of the world. AJ volunteers for 4 organizations and is a passionate crusader against oil tankers and other pressing environmental and political issues. AJ Klein.
Wow. Stop Harper Day. That's a drag, hey? I'd way rather be, watching a parade or something instead of, you can't hear me? I've never heard that before in my life, honestly. Here we go. All right, can you hear me now? Good. Well, let's see, where was I? You know what, I'm honored to be here today, speaking at the same rally as my former instructor, Professor Peter Pronzos. Peter taught a course at Langara called The Human Condition, which I was lucky enough to take. Despite our many flaws, I'm actually a big fan of the human race. I was really looking forward to getting a more in-depth look at humanity, and boy did Peter give it. That's how I felt. That's exactly how I felt. Most depressing academic experience of my life. Let me tell you, my God, the things we do to each other, really, it's unbelievable. And Peter knows about all of it. And he distilled it all down into 12 or 13 weeks of despair. And I tell you, what it feels like it was just yesterday that I was slamming my fist down on the table, swearing and ranting and exclaiming to him, "Enough! I can't take it anymore! Just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do." And so Peter, I think he knew he'd hit his mark with me. He smiled, and that's what he did. He told me what to do. He told me how to get involved, and when and where. And being involved has since become the focus of my life. You see, it's not that I didn't know. It's not that I didn't know before then that something needed to be done. It's not that I didn't want to do something. It's just that, as strange as it sounds now, and despite how concerned I was, I just hadn't yet been moved to feel compelled to try, or to feel like my efforts would matter. And I also didn't know what to do. I, like so many out there, looked out at our big, complicated, incredibly screwed up world, and I didn't know where or how to start. I didn't realize that, in fact, all I had to do was start at all, and everything would fall into place. Until Peter came along, nobody and nothing got that message through to me. You know, there are a lot of people out there in that same boat. People who live on the same street as us or work at the same job, people we see every day on the bus, people we run into randomly on the street. And if we hope to take back Canada, my friends, and we hope to turn the world and our human race around, then we're going to need a lot of people to do that. And so, as much as my heart swells to see so many familiar faces in the crowd, we, the activists, the informed, have got to branch out. We have got to reach out beyond the low-hanging fruit, beyond the choir we preach to, beyond our comfort zone of people who see the world the way we do. We live in a metropolis of roughly 2.3 million people. If we had 1% of the population here today, we'd have 23,000 people in the streets. If we're meant to be the 99%, where is everybody? If we're meant to be the 99%, where is everybody? You'd be hard-pressed to find an activist who doesn't think the global situation is dire and incredibly urgent. And if that's the case, then why aren't we doing whatever it takes to get a variety of messages out to every little corner of society? If we're standing up for the rights of each person in Canada and in the world, then where is the deaf community? Why are there not more people in wheelchairs out here today? Why are there not more families and elderly? Over 130 First Nations have signed the Save the Fraser Declaration. How many do we have represented here today? And it isn't because any of these people aren't welcome. It certainly isn't because they aren't needed. It isn't because they don't know about the problems in the world. It isn't because they don't wish that things were different. I believe it's simply because we haven't found a way to get through to enough of the various types of people that make up our community. We haven't managed to impress upon them how important it is that we get out here in the streets where we can be seen, where we can see each other and feel the growing numbers of those who are discontent in our community and in our world. The systems we're fighting against, they're big. They're big. If we want to change the world, well, we're basically going to need the world in order to make that happen. Now, as gorgeous as a world full of activists sounds, we don't have one. Not everybody knows about the things we know about. Not everyone understands the world from our perspective. I think it's pretty safe to say, however, that if we can't illustrate our point of view for people who don't automatically see the world the way we do, it's going to be pretty tough to effect widespread, meaningful change. So, if we hope to take back Canada, and we hope to effect fundamental positive change in this world, we're going to have to do the same with our community first. It's up to us to make sure that the different types of people know about all the different ways to get involved. It's up to us to provide information without overwhelming people. It's up to us, the people who know beyond a shadow of a doubt how desperately change and progress are needed to do what it takes to reach the people who can be reached, and to do it in a way that is meaningful for them. Now, I'm not saying that we need to get 99% of the population out here, but even if 5% of Vancouver Metro would be over 100,000 people. 100,000 new activists in this town who are working to educate their neighbors and strengthen their community ties would really be something. Why don't we aim for that? Why don't we each promise ourselves and each other today that in 2 months from now we will have introduced 2 new people to one movement or another, who will make it their goal to introduce 2 more, who will make it their goal to introduce 2 more still. Now, I and some of my comrades, I assure you, will be the first to tell you that I don't have all the answers. I can't give you a bullet point checklist to follow to unite our city and revamp the world, but I feel like I've got a pretty good point when I say that we don't need a detailed roadmap if we want to turn the bus around. When in doubt, going the opposite direction should be a safe bet. So, while some of the progress we need to make is pretty obvious, like, oh, we should make sure we don't have human trafficking flourishing in our city, other things aren't. In fact, it makes sense to me that when discussing and trying to change things like the endangerment of the human race, okay, the collapse of the global economy and environment, the oppression and exploitation of basically everyone by a tiny fraction of the population, well, I think it's reasonable and safe to expect that not every discussion about this is going to be necessarily linear or friendly or productive or pleasant or effective. Not every event is going to build a permanent bridge. Not every march will be candlelit. But they will, time after time, have one thing in common. They will be filled with and conducted by people who want a better world for everyone. People who understand and agree that people in general are running out of time. People like you and me. So when conflict arises, why don't we just try going in the opposite direction that we have been for the last little while now? Sorry. In the past, people in authority and positions of influence have been told how to conduct themselves by people with authority or influence over them. Why don't we try encouraging people to engage their ethics and think for themselves beyond what their orders are? Beyond what the loudest voices might be telling them. Where there once was hierarchy, let there be a network. Where before we prided ourselves on being dignified and polite and not making a fuss, let us lay aside our inhibitions and start making some noise. Where before we thought that one person was insignificant, let us believe that everyone who has ever changed the world has been only one person, as we're all the people who helped them do it, for better or for worse. Where before we drew lines in the sand, let us find common ground. And when we disagree, let us be dignified. Let us admit when we are wrong and move forward. Let us finally accomplish something that humanity keeps failing to accomplish. Let us be united in the things that matter the most and be flexible in the things further down the list. Let us speak up when we feel something is wrong instead of backing down when we are afraid. Let us change this world together instead of fighting against it alone. In closing, that's right, I'm finally done. I see a lot of big problems out there being boiled down to just a couple words or oversimplified concepts. Some of these include the environment versus jobs, right versus left, right versus wrong, forest versus critical mass. Sorry, right versus wrong, sorry about that. And I have a couple dichotomies of my own for you. Force versus critical mass. change versus a refried version of the same mistakes we've been making all along. The problems we're facing are pretty huge. There's no magic bullet, there's no magic wand. But for me, when I think about the fact that as far as we know, we're the culmination of 14 billion years of evolution of universe and planet, and when I think about how unlikely it is that I would ever be born in the first place and even get to taste this life, no matter how volatile, well, when I look at it like that, then it comes down to one simple idea. What kind of person do I want to be? What do I want to see when I look back at the end of my life, whenever that may be? What do I want to see? What do you want to see? Thank you.
Up next, we have Stephen Collis from Occupy. He is a Vancouver poet, activist, and SFU English professor. Yum. His book on the Occupy movement, Dispatches from the Occupation, will be published in September. Stephen!
Thank you. Good afternoon, Canada. I'm going to tell a short story, very short, read a very short poem, make a couple of very quick comments. I won't be here too long. So last week there was a demonstration here in Vancouver. Some of the protesters taped copies of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms to their back. So it's the page that enshrines our freedom of speech, our right to freedom of assembly, stuff like that. Taped it on their backs. And that night, a Vancouver police officer was heard to comment, "Is that a kick me sign on your back?" The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms is a kick me sign. Now, I don't want to get into the whole, police brutality, activist tactics thing right now. But I think this is emblematic of something that's going on in our country. We have a government that sees so many of the things that we have assumed were true and important about Canada as something to be disrespected. So our reputation, for instance, as an international peacekeeper, kick me sign. Our rights and freedoms, kick me sign. The idea that we might be a progressive or green country, kick me sign. Shame, that's it for sure. So, a quick poem with some kicking, a little bit. George Orwell famously once said, "You want to know what the future looks like? It's a boot stomping on a human face forever." A happy guy, that George. So, this is Orwell on Facebook. It's when we wake up to realize that we are not free. Endless links to YouTube videos of the police beating people. Some banker types claiming they are representative, elect, throwing everything, rivers, lakes, every animal on land and sea, and love itself on the fire of their endlessly accumulating wealth. It's only then that we at last face the real threshold of our lives. Are we going to like what's actually on offer, or bite down hard on the boot in our face? Try to bite down. Now we all have, we can make a real quick list, and we've heard some of it here today, of what we reject about this government and what it's doing to our country. But we also need to be able to say what we would prefer instead of this. We need to know what, some sense of what the Canada looks like that we know is not being represented by Stephen Harper's Canada. Now for me, that begins with the idea of the Commons. Not the House of Commons, that place where power and privilege does its dirty work, except for Libby, who does good work. But the idea of the Commons being that broadest sense of what we all share. Civil society, the natural resources upon which all of life depends, the cultural ideas and traditions and practices that are our common inheritance as human beings. A democracy should be stewardship of the commons, by the commons, for the commons. We have a government right now that disregards the commons, defiles the commons, and attempts to destroy the commons. Yeah. We've got to take Canada back. Thank you very much.
That was Stephen Collis, everybody. Up next, we have Suresh Fernando, who is a former financial services advisor. I have like a toonie, right? Should I spend it on coffee, Suresh? I don't know. Oh, an investment banker, exciting. And is now an active Occupy Vancouver organizer. He has most recently been supporting the Casserole marches and other Quebec student solidarity activities. Suresh.
Thanks, Jessica. First of all, I want to humbly acknowledge that this rally is taking place on unceded Coast Salish territory. I want to thank all of you for coming out and showing up today. This is going to be partly a call to citizenship and engagement, because I want to win this battle. I'm not here just to participate in rallies and go out on the streets and go through the processes, but to actually try to figure out a way to engage, mobilize, organize, and bring about the change that we're all talking about. And it's fitting, I want to thank Corinna for writing a Hopi prophecy on the concrete, because we are the ones that we've been waiting for. Our time is now, and we have to take that seriously. It's not sufficient just to go through the motions. We have to keep the end in view, and we need to deal with the complexity and the struggle that's involved with coming together. And this is really about, in relation to that, I want to talk a little bit about solidarity. Both Sasha and Stephen have alluded to some of what we have faced in the last little while, and solidarity is a difficult thing. It's not it's not an abstract concept. It's how we come together in the face of different diverging opinions, differing perspectives, differing views, different tactics, different strategies. At the end of the day, we have little power other than ourselves. It's our ability to come together that's going to give us any possibility of winning this battle. So I want to draw an analogy. I'd like all of you to think about solidarity as kind of family, right? If we need to stand together. If your brother or your mother or your sister does something that you don't like, you don't abandon them, even if you might not like some of what they did. Because we're all part of a singular struggle. Whether this battle is about environmental issues, and that's your passion, or your battle or your passion happens to be issues around the downtown east side, if they're human rights issues, it's all a part of a singular struggle, a struggle against the corporatization, pardon my poor grammar, of this world. It's really a struggle against institutions that control and oppress. And the reality is that, we've undertaken a form of revolution, and you're going to run into the system periodically, and that's okay. That's just the way it is. And we need to be able to stand together and support each other unconditionally when that happens. There's really no other way. The other thing is that I'd like to call upon you to find ways of direct engagement, whether it be with Occupy or whether it be with whatever group, find ways of getting engaged. And also, I call upon those of you that are organizers in this community and that are at this meeting or at this gathering and elsewhere to try to come together and find our basis of unity. What are the things that we can agree upon such that we can come together en masse, both in the streets or coordinated activity of one sort or another? Because, if there's 1,000 people backing you up at a rally, it's a whole lot more difficult for the authorities to confront you and to exercise undue force and power. Our power lies in our ability to coordinate activities. So, so when you're faced with a situation, and I'm repeating myself, so I'm going to close very quickly, where you don't fully agree with what's happening, just hold your tongue for a bit, sleep on it, reflect, and understand that this is a singular struggle, and that our ability to stand together literally in space and time is the only way that we're going to win this battle. So thank you very much, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Suresh. We have one more speaker left until we rock out. So, put your hands together. Well, I'll explain who it is first, I guess. Cecilia Point, I represent the Musqueam Nation, is a community and media relations for the community members of Musqueam who are currently occupying, I'm really sorry, but someone has not told me how to say this word. You will have to, I'm a douchebag, I'm sorry. Occupying somewhere with a name that I can't pronounce. I suck. Otherwise known as Mason-Paull Midden. She is presently on a leave of absence from her career in the Aboriginal tourist industry, which she chose as an occupation because it promotes Aboriginal culture and preservation of our environment. She is also a wife and mother of two. Please put your hands together for Cecilia Point.
Anta Cecilia Point, Talitza Natla Musqueam. My name is Cecilia Point. I would like to welcome you all to Musqueam territory. As she said, we are occupying a site which is one of our burial sites, and it was known to us as the village of Sasnam. Canada is not very old to First Nations people. I mean, my great-grandfather lived to be 100 years old, and he used to live near this village of Sasnam. He always talked about it, you know, to us. So we know we have hundreds of people buried there. The federal government hasn't done anything to protect it, except for in the 1930s, they recognized it as a National Historic Site. However, the only way they protected it was by putting an archaeological covenant on the property, but yet there's buildings all over it. So what's happened now is all of the other owners who live along there know, because of the archaeological covenant, they have not been allowed to dig there. They have buildings that just sit on top of a pavement. So there was a company called Century Group who is proposing to build condos and a underground parking lot and dig up our ancestors and dig up our artifacts that have been there for thousands of years.
Shame!
Thousands. There's a National Historic Site for Vikings in Grossmore National Park, where you're not allowed to pick up a rock off the ground. You're probably not even allowed to bring your dog there. But for us, it's got buildings all over it. The Heritage Act of BC does not cover First Nations sites. And the Heritage Branch issued these permits for this developer to start digging. They've already dug up 4 intact bodies, 2 adults and 2 infants, which have never been touched. And they're above the earth right now. And we want to get in there and bury them properly, culturally, and just so that even so their bones don't deteriorate. We want them to go back in the earth. So what's happened is we're in the middle of negotiations with the developer now to purchase this property back. And that leaves a really bad taste in our mouth that we have to buy our own land. Because as you know, there's no treaties for the Musqueam people. We never gave up this land to anyone.
Gave away,
as you know, the Crown, when they came here,
lots of the country without asking us. So the owner of this property has said, oh, my family lived here for 50 years. So why didn't the Musqueam just buy it? Well, 50 years ago, First Nations people were not even allowed to buy property. So how could we have bought it? And why would we ever think that they're going to destroy our ancestors? As you can see, they often just move our ancestors into storage. This has happened to a lot of First Nations. But other times they're just desecrated. Up in Kitimat, there's a huge dam where the graveyard with actual coffins and headstones keeps getting flooded, and the bodies just go down the river and nobody cares. So this is happening in Vancouver. We're located at 1338 Southwest Marine Drive. The Granville Street bus stops right there at the foot of Hudson on Marine Drive. You're welcome to come down anytime and stand with us and hold up a sign to protest this horrible action. We welcome people coming by. If you want to bring coffee or something in the morning, that would be great. We are keeping a presence there 24 hours a day. We try to have a good dinner.
Every night we have a good dinner if anyone wants to come down and join us, but mostly during the day in the mornings we're kind of light. But yes, we are there 24 hours a day. We welcome your support. We have a petition at the site that we'd like you to sign. There's also online petitions protesting against this company, Century Group, who is the same company who managed to get property out of the agricultural land reserve near the ferry, where no one has ever been able to get land out there, but they have. They have deep pockets. They're represented by the former Attorney General Jeff Plant as their lawyer.
Black and tan.
So it's, you know, as you can see, it's, you know, it's pretty obvious what's happening here. I heard someone mention it's about money. Of course it's about money, it's about capitalism, and it's not about protecting First Nations rights. You know, our graveyards, before colonialists came here, we didn't have a coffin and a headstone. We buried our people where they died. We had our own traditions, so they're in the ground. We want them to remain at rest. So I really thank everyone for your attention, and I know that we're in solidarity. We've had some great groups come down and join us. We've had the Nurses Union write a letter on our support. We had the BC Teachers Federation write a letter for our support to government. And I see a lot of young people here, and I really have to say, like, I know my younger nieces and nephews a lot of times don't think that their vote matters. And if you don't vote, this is what happens. Like, this is what happens. So please don't think your vote doesn't matter. Even if you don't like one government over the other, this government is going to cram a pipeline through this province and destroy it. And we are going to go to war. So thank you for helping us.
Thank you. That was Cecilia Point. That was the end of our speakers, and I'd like to thank every speaker who came up today. It was a really special and wonderful day. While Karina sets up for a second, I have one final thing to say. Thank you all for coming. You know that little saying, "Oh Canada, the true north, strong and free." It's around about time that we stop just saying it and actually make it be.